I grew up very quickly. Developmentally, I was very delayed, but psychologically, I would say that I was very sharp. I literally was uncomfortable with being around people who thought very little of themselves. I was intrigued by people who were successful. Also because of how I presented myself, to be honest, I think people were also curious about my story. A lot of these people became people who poured into me, who gave me opportunities.
What got you into those drums?
I think the biggest thing I would say that really afforded me those opportunities isn't even privilege or even how I look necessarily. I think it's authenticity. I was genuinely curious. And so I wasn't afraid to ask questions. Regardless whether somebody didn't see me, I was still curious. I still asked questions. When I think about African people and their economic standing in this country, I think a lot of it is self-inflicted, in my personal opinion. But a lot of it is also how we do business in our own countries.
Self-inflicted, why?
Some Africans, honestly, majority, are very afraid to take a risk. If they're in a networking event, a lot of times they haven't worked on their confidence to go up to somebody who's a white man who is suited up to get to know them. These are soft skills, you know, but nobody tells you you have to develop them. And because we're so used to giving up, like we're already beaten down because of our experiences. We're here already. Journey coming to Australia is already tiresome. Like, why should I pay $50 to be in a room full of people that are not even going to see me? There are opportunities everywhere in this country. There is a door that is always open, but there is fear already existing because in a way it actually attacks an identity that exists, and that's a poverty identity.
Where do we find out those information? I've been reading the comments and DMs, and they are filled with beautiful messages about how much you've enjoyed watching and listening to these conversations and how powerful the stories have been. But here's the problem. Over 90% of you watching are not yet subscribed, and I know you're watching. So please hit that subscribe button to join our podcast community and help us attain our goal of reaching 2,000 subscribers in the next 2 months. Thank you. What does it mean to be 30?
Oh, you led with that. Oh my goodness. Ooh, 30.
I've said it many times.
I have.
30 now.
I tell everybody I'm 30, right? I tell everybody, like everybody else.
What does 30 mean to you?
Oh my goodness. So I made a lot of promises to myself growing up, and it felt that it wasn't happening, much earlier. So I said by 30, I'm gonna really crack the code. And so for me, I went on an adventure in my 20s of self-discovery, of, I guess, what I call failing safely, trialing different things, being curious and exploring so much of what I'm capable of. And I have gotten to this age now where I would say that I've achieved most of what I promised I would achieve. And so to be at this age and then to reflect on the last 10 years, ever since I turned 20, is a reminder that I can do anything I put my mind to, even in the next 10 years. So it's a very monumental age for me to get to. And for people who know me would understand how crazy the last 10 years has been with everything that I've experienced and explored in this lifetime. So it's a proud moment to safely land, I should say, and to be here. So yeah,
what
very
What
excited.
promises you made to yourself?
Well, I said that I would stabilize my family. I would have clarity on my identity. I would be firm in my beliefs and faith, and also have a stable business, and also really, really know who my tribe is, who my people is, and to have clarity in all areas, and to also be healthy. I think I battled so much in my 20s. I was like, am I gonna finish this mission? And now that I'm in my 30s, to look at everything I have, everything that I've achieved, and all the people who are behind me and the great things that are happening even now as we speak, I would say that honestly, it, the promises, there's more than 30 promises, and I'd say that I've accomplished 80%, which is huge. Like, nobody just accomplishes that amount in a very short period. So, and I worked so hard, extremely hard to achieve some of that. And traveling, going back home, doing a solo trip. And it's a lot of privilege, But I afforded myself those privileges, and I sacrificed so much to actually achieve it, and I did. So I think, yeah.
I'd like to go a bit further into that. It's it's quite amazing to hear that you made yourself promises like when you were 20s,
Mm.
and gladly you can say to yourself that 80% of those have been accomplished. Not many people can say that.
Nope. Exactly.
My question to you would then be, how did you do that? What sort of help
Mm.
did you get, if you got any?
Well, to answer that question, I would like to start with being born in war. I'm a war kid. I lived in displacement for more than 10 years of
You're
my life.
Rwandan, yeah?
Sorry?
You're Burundian, sorry.
Burundian.
Yes.
So I was born in the war in 1996 in Burundi. Well, it was not really just a war. It was a genocide.
As the Tutsis
Yep.
and I watched the movie.
Yeah, it was a very political war. And honestly, I didn't know much about it until a few years ago when another promise to myself is to learn about my history, connect with my roots. And that was achieved in 2018 when I went back to Africa before COVID with my mom after 20 years. So I wasn't I wasn't familiar with where I was from and like my history, my upbringing, to see it for myself, to experience it, and to really experience that shock of what it was like to be a child in those environments. It's not just poverty, it's the opportunities that are available. And so living in those sort of environments, you kind of feel hopeless. And as I came to Australia at the age of 10, I from 10 to 20, it was just warfare. Like, it was just so chaotic in my childhood. Depression, anxiety, violence, puberty, the whole lot. So you can imagine that build up to being 20 and the promises I had to make, which led to me making those promises for the next 10 years to really kind of undo the harm and also maybe unlearn some psychological things because, I'm the oldest of 10. And so what that means is I grew up very quickly. Developmentally, I was very delayed, but psychologically, I would say that I was very sharp. So I was always switched on, always running around, causing trouble, the good type of trouble. And so my siblings looked up to me. And so part of me making those promises at 20, what it involved was getting in the room with the right people. And I love to read. I absolute bookworm. And books gave me an insight to the possibilities because a lot of people who are authors have gone through things, and usually they give you an anecdote. They give you answers to questions that you might not be even asking. And so for me, I connected with the right people unknowingly. I literally was uncomfortable with being around people who thought very little of themselves. I was intrigued by people who were successful. I was, even like playing AFL, for an example, it excited me, and so I just stuck at it. But through that as a sport, it helped me to settle in this country, to understand Australian people. There's a lot of like subtle undertones of how Africans are perceived or how Africans perceive people who are Australian, quote unquote Australian. And so for me, I developed a non-judgment mindset in those sort of environments. And also because you're around people who are very talented, very secure, very, like, I just was so curious. So I've lived a life of curiousness, but also what it meant is I always would ask, can we go to coffee? But also because of how I presented myself, to be honest, I think people were also curious about my story. And ultimately, without being too organized about it, a lot of these people became people who poured into me, who gave me opportunities, who allowed me in the room. I would be crazy to lie that I've been in board meetings as a teenager and even in my early 20s, not knowing anything about governance, not knowing anything about what's a P&L or, like,
What made you?
yeah. So
I'm curious to know. Sorry to cut you. I'm curious to know what, apart from the courage and all of other stuff, what got you into those rooms in specific terms? Or
yeah,
is it privilege, or is it work, or is it your look? Or
I'll be honest with you. I didn't think about too much of, oh, I need to do this to get here. I think the biggest thing I would say that really afforded me those opportunities isn't even privilege or even how I look necessarily. I think it's authenticity. I was genuinely curious. And so I wasn't afraid to ask questions. There's a particular moment, for an example, where I had 50 games in my football journey, and I saw Mark McGowan. This is before I went into the government. And I just asked him to make a video with me and to say, oh, I kicked 50 goals. I wasn't thinking, oh, this is going to get me close to him or anything. I just wanted to do that because it's, I was doing a little thing where I wanted people to give advice. And so what that ended up looking like, I guess, in the online world was, oh, I'm connected to him. But the next thing I knew was that I am in the government. I can't tell you I wanted to be there, but people are watching the things that I'm putting online or the way I'm carrying myself. I think the biggest thing, honestly, to wrap it up, is just to be me and not to expect that somebody will see me. But regardless whether somebody didn't see me, I was still curious. I still asked questions to even the prime minister, to even somebody who was a millionaire or somebody who's connected. I just wanted to know them. I didn't know them, but I wanted to know. And I think most people forget to ask questions and just listen. And that's what I did.
listen and ask questions.
Yeah. But
So,
intentional.
it's been intentional, being
Intentional.
curious, actually,
Yeah.
wanting to find out.
Yeah.
Tell me about your time in the government. What were you? Is that like a political appointment or an elected position?
Yeah, look, there was a lot of positions that I held in government as a young person, again in my 20s. So the first role that I ever held was in the office of Dr. Anali, who's now the Minister of Small Business, and she was the Minister of Youth. And I adore her so much. I think she's an incredible woman. I invited her to a Youth Week event. There was over 300 young people at a park, and I've always been passionate about young people. And it was around Youth Week. So Youth Week is a state government initiative that is all about celebrating youth in Western Australia. Now, when I invited her, kid you not, she hired me on the spot as her community engagement coordinator. I have no experience in government, in politics. I don't know anything. In fact, politics at that stage, I had no interest in. I think I was just turning 21. And the next thing I knew, I was on the first Youth Ministerial Advisory Council, and she endorsed my my
Appointment?
yeah. Well, it wasn't. You just had to submit like a thing, but she put in a good word for me.
Yeah.
And because I was working for her at the time, and she really like mentored me, like supported me understanding politics, but also just government. Like I didn't understand federal politics. Mind you, she is a federal member for the area that I lived. So it was so ironic and just everything how it lined up. So there was that, and then the Youth Ministerial Advisory Council, and then I became the chair of that Youth Ministerial Advisory Council, which basically advised the minister on different policies We wrote position papers on things that matter to youth. We advised the minister on homelessness, on mental health, all sorts of issues.
When you think about the kind of impact you want to leave on your world, this earth, through your work, what does legacy look like for you, Bella?
Yes, so this is something that really not troubles me, but kind of I carry throughout the day around my legacy and impact. I mean, at the core of everything I do, I'm always thinking, how is what I'm saying being received? I think this is something that I began probably as I was leading into my 30s. And I would say that I really want people to feel that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are people who have completely gone through the trenches to pave a way. And I believe because of my journey, in everything that I've done and achieved unintentionally, I have also opened up a room for others. Not that I want to claim that in any way, but I think about legacy, and I want people to remember me as somebody who literally created space, who went before us and achieved something that was probably impossible. Like, I think about being an African AFL coach. I look in the industry right now. I don't see a lot of African AFL coaches, but if somebody was to look up at somebody who's done it, I've done it. Not because that was the intention, but it's there. It's there if you want to learn of my journey. There's a lot of visible things as well, like the W Museum has my portrait, my boots, my top, and my medals, because there's not really a lot of African girls who play AFL these days, but I stuck at it for quite a long time.
How long were you in? I'm not sure I've met you then, or you. I'm not
Like,
sure we. How long ago was this?
I was 17 when I started playing,
So that would be 13 years ago.
but I started coaching when I was 14, turning 15.
That was way before I got here.
Yes, I was a kid.
When you retire?
Ooh, I retired.
Still very young.
Is there such thing? No, I
Where did you hang your boots? Just put it that
Okay,
way.
well, so playing, I actually had an injury in 20. I don't remember. It was so long ago, but I had minor injuries. Like, I did my shoulder, my fingers, I did my ankles, I did my LCL, and I was in and out. So I finally hung my boots when I had like a lot of swelling on my knees. It was basically a rupture coming on my lateral ligament. So I hung the boots probably 27.
That was 3 years ago.
Yeah, I hung the boots.
When, as a coach,
As a coach, I'd say last year.
as an active player at 27,
And
how come I haven't seen any of your game? That's quite strange, actually. That was just 3 years ago.
well, I played resis and I played league and then amateurs. Amateurs,
You,
I went to multiple clubs actually. So I started off at West Perth, the Garlic Matches, many people will know. West Perth Women's. This is before it became a Waffle W. So this is now under the
that's it.
official competition. And then I went to East Perth. They didn't have a league team. And then I played for Balladura, and then I played for Kareen. I played for multiple clubs actually, probably about 7. Yeah, I moved around because I was literally trying to. I think when it comes to like injury, it's trauma in itself, but because I stuck it out, I really it was actually, now that I think about it, my identity was just AFL for the longest time. I was doing everything through the AFL lens because obviously I started off coaching AFL at such a young age and it was comfortable. It brought a lot of a lot of opportunities for me, but I also felt home in those sort of environments because of the things that we did. I was coaching and managing a multicultural AFL team, which was predominantly actually dominated by
Okay.
African kids, I should say. And a lot of those kids have gone off to play state football, very successful kids, still very much in touch with them. A lot of them are actually my neighbors because when I was running the program, it was like literally in front of my house. And so when I got injured, I was like trying to find my way back, but I couldn't. The injuries kept on piling up. And then I tried rugby, tried gridiron, tried basketball. It just didn't feel the same, didn't provide the same comfort. And so when I think about my legacy, I think a lot of it is rooted in my AFL journey, to be honest, because when I was a teenager, like when I say teenager, I'm saying I got here at the age of 10. So 4 years after, I'm still trying to settle in this country, figure out what's going on. And I'm going through puberty at the same time. And, so to get to that stage where I'm now an AFL coach, like latching onto it, and it became my actual identity. And so when I got injured and then going back to Africa, do you kind of see it now? When I went back to Africa in 2018, I was injured at that point. That was my first major injury. And then I had fell into depression, let's just call it that way. When I went to Africa, my whole world was spun around because that's when I actually realized my whole identity is in this sport, this AFL game. And I kept on asking myself why. I was latched onto it. Like I was coaching, I was managing, I was playing, I was officiating, we call it, not reffing. And I was working for the Football Commission as a community engagement coordinator. I was doing media for AFL diversity. Everything was AFL. And in my hearts of hearts, I said, I'm going to actually coach the men's teams on TV. So I had like set that as my direction. And I think a lot of it was the people that I was around. I was heavily influenced by incredible people. Jan Cooper, the woman who was the CEO of the actual women's competition. Paul Mugamba, who was my boss for years and years, who is still a good friend, was the first African waffle player in Australia. I knew him since high school, actually. And so when that kind of identity shattered, and then to go back home and then to then come back to Australia, I realized, why have I limited myself to a sport? And I think from that point on, realizing, especially when you go back to Africa, one thing is very clear. Like, these are people who love God because they are living in impoverished communities. They are living through poverty, or they have nothing in comparison to what we have. So ultimately, they pray a lot. So my grandmother, while I'm injured, oh my goodness, she is praying for me every night. And slowly, slowly, I don't know what happened, something miraculous, let's call it, God doing what God does, literally reframed my identity. So when I came back to Australia, I didn't have that attachment to the sport. Hence why, actually, I went into politics. I went into government. It was so easy for me to fit right in, even though I had, like, put up the boots.
I was going to ask you a question. First, what led you to take that journey to Africa, Burundi specifically? Yeah. One, you're returning. How long did you stay there? Coming back to Australia. Okay, I'll take it one after the other. What led you there? How long did you stay? Then I'll go from there.
Oh, yeah. So what led me was literally my AFL injury. So long story short, the AFL women's competition was up and running at this point in time. So this meant the best of the best were getting drafted into the AFL competition. But it was such a short competition that when the season began, you had actual AFL players playing against players who have not had that same opportunity to play against of the best on TV.
Huh.
These are now paid players. They're flying interstate, and it's So in the women's competition, you had women who were 6 foot, who were very fit, had crazy fitness regimens, playing against a team like ours. Because the previous year we had won a premiership. So what this meant is we were now upgraded to the league. So in the league, you had AFL players in their off season, which was the official season. And so as a player in that competition, I'm up against very talented women who are playing very competitive sport. And so ultimately what happened was I got injured. I think I went out for a mark. And then when I landed, I had been tackled. But the way I landed was a very awkward position. And when it's a fair tackle, it's a fair tackle.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what happens unless it was done with malice, which is not usually the case because everybody's trying to win. I think it was round 5. I was playing for West Perth League, and then essentially, that was the start of many swollen knees. And it wasn't too bad because usually you get a physio who straps you up, and so I had no issues. I've never had crazy injuries, and then essentially one day, another thing happens. I end up in hospital. And then the doctor says, look, we got to drain your knee and we got to do the proper scan. So when I did the scan, I had a minor tear. And that was the worst news possible because basically was told I need to do recovery. But that sent me into a depressive episode, like episodes over and over. Thank God I had my mom. Thank God I had my mentor who was really supportive during that period. But I was bedridden. I had crutches. I couldn't walk 4 days, and I just didn't want to. I didn't want to do surgery. God forbid. I said no surgery whatsoever, only because I've seen players because at that point I'm coaching. I've seen players who've done ACL, LCL surgeries, and their knees look funny. I'm not trying to have that in my life. I'm a cute girl, and so what ended up happening was essentially. I went to Africa. Like Mom said, enough is enough because I was way too depressed for too long. Mom said, we're going to Africa. So she booked a ticket and said, off we go because the only solution is home after 20 years. Imagine, this is what it took for us to go back home. But at that point, Mom had literally said, nothing is working. I was seeing a psychologist. We had a family dog. Her name is Molly. She got depressed as well. It was so sad. She got depressed and I was like, okay, there's nothing. Medication wasn't helping. Nothing was helping. So I went back home and we stayed for over a month. Literally just trying to get over this stuff that's going on in my head. And it was the trip that I needed. Literally.
You go back?
I go back.
Had an entirely change of mindset, change of direction. Was that the point where, I know we talked about this on the phone, where when I first knew you, you were in quotes tomboy, according to the language you used?
I was a bit of tomboy.
Tomboy. Was that at that point you noticed or you decided to change, or what caused that change for you?
I don't think it was a choice. I think what was happening while I was in Africa was a lot of reframing. There's a certain level of loneliness in this country. And I think a lot of times it's because we think that somehow just because we're here, like, I don't know how to frame it, but it's like we are alone in this. When I went back to Africa, there's a whole tribe. Like my grandmother, my aunties, my uncle. I never realized how much family I had, like connected to me by blood, who are really good people, who are prayer warriors, who are incredibly successful.
Love you genuinely.
Yeah, and have fought so much for me to still be alive. Like they pour into my mom, who ultimately pours into me. And so I never realized that was happening in the background. That there's people who are fighting silent battles for me, like praying for me. And that meant so much to just hear it, to see it, to go into the village and spend time in nature, I went for walks with my grandmother, and she spoke so much life into me. In fact, I went to the I went to the place I was born. And I remember, like, my mom was telling me, oh, this is where you used to play. This is your little feet used to just stomp here and take food to these little kids. And I was like, how come am I hearing this for the first time? Like, I literally realized the person I am today is the person I was as a kid because my mother literally encouraged it. She always pushed me to be adventurous. She always wanted me to feel confident, to be confident. And so being in those environments back home, walking with my grandmother holding my hands and seeing the avocado trees, it was so nostalgic, because even though I grew up in displacements, like different countries, in Tanzania more specifically, it felt like, oh, there's that little girl. I always say, obviously, growing up in a house full of boys and being the oldest, I was drawn towards being more like a boy because it was the most relatable. But realizing that I'm actually just a little girl through just those experiences I had in Burundi, and also seeing like other little girls, it just reminded me so much of myself, and just being like playful. And literally, when I came back to Australia, I was like, it doesn't really matter. Like, AFL is not my identity. AFL is not who I am. AFL was just like I guess you could say, like, an opportunity to be someone. But that someone that was created, whatever framing I had in my mind was not who I was. Like, I actually belong to someone. I belong to not just someone, but people who have raised me. And I never knew any of like those stories until I went back home. Yeah.
Thank you. I do see a lot of sense and relatability in what you just said. Life, I've come to realize it. I read as a chapter for me. Sorry, my voice is a bit going now.
Yeah.
Got a bit of cold. I see life as a chapter, and we are like a book. Sorry, with different chapters, and we are the author of these books. Now, this season it could be AFL, and when that chapter is done, flip it
To the next
to the
season.
next.
Yeah. I learned that.
and that's the way I've come to see life personally for me. For me personally as well, I've done quite a few things. I've done filming the longest, but the whole grand scheme of them, business wise, and I've done a whole lot.
Yeah.
And at this point in my life as well, I've decided, okay, I need to flip this chapter. I was a photographer, done videos on the studio. Now I want to go into impact projects.
Yeah.
That chapter of me coming to events and filming your event is probably been switched over into something else. And I call the shots. I decide when that time happens and when to call time on each of this. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'll move on this conversation.
I get you.
Why do entrepreneurship, especially among Africans,
Entrepreneurship.
still feels or still seen as very underrated?
Oh, it's a big conversation. Look, my family upbringing is not business. It's education. It's politics. Hence why I dibbled and dabbled in that. But when it comes to business, like, one thing was very clear, because I've been doing BN Collective for a couple of years. And I was in and out, partly because I was interconnected to the not-for-profit sector. So the not-for-profit sector, the reality is everyone's fighting for the same money, and the government gives money that they take, not that they make. And when it comes to business or entrepreneurship, it's such a great opportunity to make money on your own terms, meaning you set the contract, meaning you set the price.
That you want to make.
Exactly. You can go so much further versus the not-for-profit sector, or even like the medical field. A lot of times, yes, there's a lot of subsidies from the government, but to be honest, it's very hard to turn certain things into businesses, especially those that are to do with human, like suffering. Like social work, for an example, it's very hard to have a business in social work. Or like as a doctor, absolutely you can have your own medical practice, but it's just so heavily regulated, you know. But the thing I'm excited about in business, particularly for the demographic that I work with, young people. When I was growing up in this country, it was very clear that economically I just wasn't up to par. I didn't have the economic standing. I didn't have, in fact, as much as I had opportunities and different people, I just didn't know how to ask for capital and support. And so when I got into business and started to investigate, I mean, like I literally started on me through learning about leadership and confidence and debating and negotiation. These are very key skills that you need in business, and you can softly like learn them as a young person, because maybe a degree is not an option right now. Maybe your parents are pressuring you to not even go in business because you're losing more money than you're gaining at your age. And so for me, I really had a great opportunity because I honed in on what I'm good at. And I'm very, very good at helping people succeed. And that's not because I'm boasting about my success rate, but it's just because of experiences. I've seen too much. I know too many people, and I talk too much. And honestly, I'm good at connecting people. It's a really good skill. And so since I can't start a product, okay, let me put it on the table. I have one service-based business, which is my main source of income. I have 2 product businesses, and I have a brand. So that's like full time. I've got a lot on my plate, but it hasn't always been that way. First of all, when I think about African people and their economic standing in this country, I think a lot of it is self-inflicted, in my personal opinion.
That's true.
But a lot of it is also how we do business in our own countries.
I'll break that then. Self-inflicted. Why? Let's expand on that a bit, and then we'll come to the next point. You just read. How to do business.
Self-inflicted. Okay, so think about my journey to Australia. My journey to Australia is I came to Australia as a refugee, and very much at a very young age. And then our parents as well, maybe in the same migration journey, but they're in survival. Literally, they're trying to make ends meet. So they got to do something that's going to bring money quickly to provide for the family. On the other side, so the way to look at it is always to look at someone's migration journey. So you got people who come, African people who come to this country economically, but the
That's first-generation migrants.
Could be first generation. Like, for instance, they come here to study.
Yep.
They've been sponsored by a friend or a family member. They've come here to study or to work. Primarily study, that's what I've seen. But a lot of times they get stuck in those kind of structures because they got to keep up with the regulations. You know, like when you're working, for an example, you work a certain amount of hours, depending on your visa. But as a refugee, you get, permanent residency, and then you get your citizenship. But what you're battling with is actually trauma, generational trauma, but obviously things that have happened to you that forced you into this environment that you weren't prepared for. When you're an economic migrant or refugee, whether you're coming here to study or, you're on a family sponsorship visa just to be here to explore the place, the pathway is very clear. You would have done your research, and there's financial investment. Somebody's financially invested in you. Maybe you get sponsored by your workplace. See, these two things are very, very different when coming to Australia. And one group is suffering one thing and another group is suffering another thing. So when I say it's self-inflicted, is a lot of people don't unpack the murkiness that takes place in these structures. So I can only speak for myself. Like, as a refugee, for an example, obviously I had a fair advantage because I was young and I was able to go to school. I was able to learn the language quicker. My parents, on the other hand, couldn't do that because we're talking about 50 years, 30 years, 40 years of different languages, and then learning the system, but also providing for the family. So the format in which the system in which we operate in Australia is capitalism for the most part.
Yep.
But a lot of it is, if you work hard, you can get somewhere. In Africa, if you work hard, you might not get somewhere. So if you've had trauma, for an example, and you don't get the services or the support in this country to maybe unlearn some of those things, you just keep operating in a vicious cycle. And the same goes for those who come to this country economically. And a lot of it is obviously connections and access. Some Africans, honestly, majority, are very afraid to take a chance, to take a risk. If they're in a networking event, a lot of times they haven't worked on their confidence to go up to somebody who's a white man who is suited up, to get to know them. These are soft skills, but nobody tells you you have to develop them. It's when you're presenting yourself, you can't present yourself as a village person. It doesn't work in this society, because every time you put yourself out there and you learn safely, you fail safely, but you don't give up, a lot of times there's blaming. Oh, this person didn't give me this opportunity. I went to this, that's enough. No, it takes years. It takes a long time. Just like building a business. Like, how many brands, how many businesses would we have operating if they understood the system of Australia? There's requirements when you're running a business. You need an ABN, business insurance, a website. A lot of African people are still operating businesses
Traditionally.
not in the way the system is, but there's somebody who can always teach you, but you need to ask. And so when I say self-inflicted, is there are opportunities everywhere in this country. There is a door that is always open, but there is fear already existing. I don't know, I wouldn't say it's rejection, but it's because they're not willing. And not willing is a kind of way of saying that they're not willing to learn the Australian way, because actually, and not the Australian way, the Australian system of doing business, because in a way, it actually attacks an identity that exists. And that's a poverty identity. And the poverty identity, what I mean by that, this is something I unpacked in my mentorship, is just because in Africa you can sell a meal for $7. If you go to an Asian shop, if you go to a Middle Eastern shop, and you see somebody selling it not for $7, but what the value is, don't be scared. You can sell yours too, but you need to create validity for your business. You also need to create a reputation. But all of these things are learned, and you have to be curious enough to actually wanting to learn and putting yourself out there, not to be afraid. And there's a lot of fear, obviously, but I would say fear is one that comes and goes depending on your environment, your historical context, what you tolerate, and who you surround yourself with.
Open what I call a Pandora's box. Got quite a few
It's
questions.
it's a what there, isn't it? Business is
Got quite a few questions in there. First, it's for the class of people you just mentioned. I fall into our class coming here as
the economic
migrants,
Okay.
fourth generation, as a student, trying to figure life out and all of stuff. I also agree there's a whole lot of opportunities. To harness those opportunities, you need to be in the right places. You need to be in the right place.
Yeah.
You also need to ask the right questions.
Yes.
The other thing I then was saying to myself is, coming into a place like this, a whole lot of things you don't know. Sometimes you can know
Everything.
and your knowledge is just can only go as far as the network or the people you have around you. And if you come here as a student, you realize most of the people you know are probably fellow students like you, economic migrants like you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not an economic migrant. But...
No, I'm saying, for instance, I'm talking about myself.
Okay.
So most of those, are going to be those that are in the same struggle as you.
Yeah, I get you.
All right? And in certain ways, it's good because it provides comfort, especially if we're all going through the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
A certain level of comfort.
Yeah.
But then also, if you want to break out of that circle, then a certain level of work that's then required of you, which is what you're talking about. You
Yes.
intentionally go away, go find out this. Now, my question to you would then be, where do we find out those information?
Well, here's what I would say. Look, this is why for me, I think I have achieved what I have achieved because I've been very authentic. Like, I don't try and sugarcoat whatever I need. Like, if I want a business partnership with somebody, unapologetically, I'm going to ask. But being authentic is not necessarily even a skill. It's like you don't beg, don't force it. If it's meant to be, it will be. But you have to, you have to, what's the word? You got to have a competitive edge. You know, like what makes you different? Is it that you're begging? Is it that you are wanting this? And then how do you present it? So, like, for an example, there is a lot of like business clubs, business meetings, business networking events, and some of them are paid. Now, if you have a mindset where you're not willing to pay or invest because you're so used to getting like
First off,
things for free because you've received services in the not-for-profit sector, I'm not going against that, but at some point you have to come out and take a risk on yourself. And so there is quite a bit. There's quite a bit out here. And this is why I do mentoring, to be honest, because I would be lying to say that I've gotten where I've gotten because of just my authenticity. No, somebody has invited me into a room. Somebody has given me the opportunity. Somebody has opened the door. And it hasn't always been mentors. It's been individuals who've seen me for me. And because I've put out there who I am. And I mean, like, we live in a digital age, right? You can get on camera, speak about yourself.
Yeah.
I kid you not, somebody will hear your story and reach out, even if it takes a couple of months. Like, don't be afraid. And I think the other big thing is like rejection. Just because you get rejected once doesn't mean you should give up. And because we're so used to giving up, like we're already beaten down because of our experiences. We're here already. The journey coming to Australia is already tiresome. Like, why should I pay $50 to be in a room full of people that are not even going to see me? Why is that the mindset? Look, it's very simple. Go into a room, dress up well. If it's a networking business, do your research, right? You know, dress up well and then actually prepare. So when I mentor, I actually tell my mentees, don't just go to an event just for the sake of it. Sit down and do some reflections. Like, why are you going? What are you hoping to gain? Like, okay, set yourself some goals. I'm going to get 3 business cards. And actually, once I get these 3 business cards, I'm going to reach out. It's a lot of work, Emmanuel. But unfortunately, this is the extra layer of hardship that we have to go through as being Africans in this country. And it shouldn't be seen as a weakness because we are very few in this country. But I think the biggest thing for me is like, we're very competitive against each other. And I know it's been a conversation had, but I don't think we unpack why do we even compete against each other when we know the most successful groups of people actually work together. And I'm always inclined to think it's because, I don't know, we just don't really like seeing each other win because we're always competing in our own countries for power or whatever. And that needs to be undone. And I think a generation like today, my generation, I should say, I think we have a really good opportunity to undo it. But it takes a tribe, doesn't it? It takes a tribe. And, you know, just like for an example, being on this podcast, typically it will be someone else doing a podcast like this. The fact that you've taken initiative, that's a legacy in itself. But if you're the only one doing it, it's going to take much longer. And I think being connected to people who are doing it already is hard enough, right? But if I see like some of the people that you've interviewed today, and I'm genuinely interested in their story or wanting to get to know them, best believe they probably know 50 people that I don't. Why can't we create that as a network? Why can't we tap into their networks and them not to feel threatened that I would love to tap into their networks, vice versa? I don't have like such an attachment as that. If anybody's watching would like to reach out and say, look, do you know so-and-so? Like, people know me. I will never be afraid to say, look, here's who I know. Reach out. Let me know if you want me to do an introduction. It takes no effort. I'm willing to do that, but is anybody else
Willing to do.
like me willing to do so? So it would take a collective, I think, but we're a long way because we make it so. It could happen overnight.
What is this thing about? 'Cause just to unpack what you just mentioned here about we not find it hard to work together, and I've seen that happen many times, even in my many of the things I do. What is it about our past as migrants that is really affecting our ability to work together? Whereas you see other, race and they do this stuff very well. I don't want to mention anyone, but you see what you see, we know what I'm talking about, where see them work together and they grow together. But then when it comes to myself and yourself, I mean, black people, it's really hard.
Yes, we judge very harshly because the thing I've come to realize now, that I'm in my big girl age, is that everyone is battling something. Oh my gosh. Just want to cry, like thinking how much I've learned in this past couple of years of just like, I think it's subconscious as well. Like I used to just judge, like where does that come from? And I think it's because I watched it as a kid in my in the refugee camps that I was in. Like, okay, take it like this. Well, my story, I don't know everybody else, but there's probably similar themes. We're living in Tanzania. These are people who've worked for miles to be here. It's not just Burundians. You've got Congolese. You've got you've got Tanzanians, Burundians, Rwandese. You've got Kenyans, all mashed up in this place. All of them have different cultural ways of practicing. So obviously, naturally, they will clash.
Yeah,
But what's collectively keeping
everyone there.
together, if I was to name it on top of my head, is that they're very family oriented, believe in God, Jesus. So there are very collective themes, but those themes is like it doesn't apply to the behavior. So it's like, yeah, just because you believe in Jesus Christ, I can forgive you. It doesn't work like that. If you harm me, it's going to cause me to have a certain perception on you and your type of people. It's a subconscious thing, I think. And then because in Africa, we have very damaging systems of dealing with conflict. And by that, I mean like forget and forgive, or they're your brothers. You should just do this. You should like, when we come to Australia and we bring those notions, it's actually creates more separation. So for an example, you've got people who run hair businesses, makeup businesses, multiple Africans. I'm just like, why can't we collaborate? Like, why are we not working together? Why don't we have a business networking event to find out how we can support each other? And when I say supporting each other, I mean like, okay, look, we are Africans. Only we understand our textured hair. Why do we need to go for someone else if there's another business like in the neighborhood who can do that? And honestly, it's the biggest thing that has confused me because obviously I grew up with very Western Australians, very like evolved people. Let's just say, I'm not trying to be like rude or anything. And the way I've seen it is that there's an innate kindness. And even coming to Australia as a refugee, it was out of the goodness of the kindness of this country. Could we do the same? Probably not, because we're always thinking of what we lack. And what we lack is typically money or resources. So if you think about what you lack, but somebody else has it, why is it hard for you to ask? And again, I think fear. I think there's a lot of this is what I saw. There's a lot of competition in business. For instance, in a marketplace, you got people who are trying to sell the same thing in a whole line. So automatically, if children and the generations are exposed to that, everyone's competing for the same thing, just like the not-for-profit sector. And so you come to Australia, how do you undo that unless you take a proactive approach to learn the actual truth of why you think the way you think to begin with? I'm just so surprised sometimes when it just doesn't make sense, but we're able to do it when it comes to sport. You know why? Because there's no financial exchange. I think it's also the relationship we have with money and how we perceive with money. Money is very scarce in Africa. Very scarce.
I would take that to be the answer. No.
Okay.
Money is very scarce.
Very scarce.
See, we've all come from quote unquote poverty.
Mm.
And it's not a lack of resources.
No, not at all.
It's here. We've all come from a place of lack. Mind you, we're all economic migrants taking a living.
Yeah.
We're all left wherever we are to this place.
Yeah.
For want of a better life. Or that's true.
Absolutely.
So we've come from a poverty mentality.
You could say that.
Coming to a place where there is so much.
Oh, yeah. We don't know what to do with that.
Yes. And we want to grab everything to ourselves. We don't want to return back to...
That's true. That's very true.
And that's where the problem is as well for our leaders back home, where, for instance, where I come from, where you have
that one.
This one that has everything,
and everyone's like,
yet lives in this old house by themselves, and then walk out of your streets. There's poverty all around you, and you're the only one that has everything. And it does baffle me a lot when I see that, but unfortunately, I have come to realize that to be one of the key problems. It's our loss for money. It's our table tests for money.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's crazy.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And not like you're going to make all the money. You see, and that's why you come as well. You see a lot of us, just keep walking.
Oh, yeah. And we literally learn a life.
Bro, can you slow down? Can you slow down?
Literally.
Can you slow down? And also that then goes back to the point we've just said earlier, where we've come into a system, we got a job maybe like as a nurse or whatever.
Oh, we settle for it.
And we just settle. So long as I've got my fortnightly pay coming up, 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is, I'm fine. I'm just going to walk that shift. If I do the 10 shifts, and I will do that. And nobody's going to think outside the box. Let me try do something else. Let me pursue entrepreneurship, because that changes the dynamics a bit.
Yes, but you know what else it is? And I'm particularly passionate about women, but I think it's also the weight in which, I guess, the two different genders have. Like, for an example, in Africa, at least when I was growing up, I don't know now, there was a beautiful idea of men being the provider. In this country, it's not possible. The woman has to work by force.
Of course.
But there's also this maternal instinct that is biologically inbuilt in every woman to provide for their family, for the children. How do you juggle that on top of including the pressure that you're already facing back home to provide?
For those
it's literally impossible. But according to statistics, Australia has an opportunity to pump over $9 billion into the economy if there was a focus on investing into migrants to have an economic footprint in this country, particularly women, because this is just the reality, you know? Like, a lot of women are actually running businesses, maybe not formally in the way that they're supposed to be running, with the right education, with the right connections, and with the right systems, but they are running businesses. It's just what it is, but it could potentially scale, like anybody can scale, depending on the connections they have, the mindset in which they actually develop over time, like their relationship towards money, and maybe not attaching themselves too much on what's historically there. Like, yes, like for me, I was I was born in war. Yes, I grew up in displacement, but I can't victimize myself to that story, which is dead and gone. It is still a story that I carry, but it's not my current situation. I'm actually very much economic in this country, so I cannot even claim to be a refugee. I say I'm a former refugee, but for those who are, settling in this country, I get it. It's very, very difficult. But I think that's why, I'm more inclined to make sure my legacy is about opening doors. And maybe it's not about me doing it by myself.
How do we build leverage
Leverage
in a system that wasn't built with
for,
us in mind?
yeah, ooh, that's a big question. How do you build leverage? Well, honestly, because I've been working on my personal brand for the longest time now, I understand that structures in this country is not for a person like me, unfortunately. And it breaks my heart because it's like, I can't blame them because, listen, we have not been in this country for a long time. So I can't imagine that if the roles were turned around,
Yeah.
they came into a system that I have in my country, it would work for them.
Yeah.
So I always say that,
Quite thoughtful. Yeah, that's quite a good point.
yeah, and I always say that, what we obviously most of our African countries were colonized. And sometimes we carry that with us for the rest of our lives, and it literally haunts us. And sometimes we tend to see people in those lenses because they're white, they are colonizers. And I have unlearned a lot of that because I have a lot of friends who are Australian, a lot of non, you know, and I just feel a little bit uncomfortable to say that they are not they're not wanting me to succeed in a system that's already built. Now, there is a way to utilize the system. However, it requires a bit of how do I say this? A competitive edge, but also for you to be sharp and strategic. When I say that, I mean, whatever you're doing, let it line up to your ultimate goals, but also get the right people on your team intentionally. Not because you want to have any personal gain, but because whatever you're building is actually bigger than you. It's bigger than what you're trying to achieve in your family lineage. Breaking generational chains, for an example. That's my mission in life. Having financial freedom. I mean, that's anybody's dream, but is what you're putting on paper and the people you're associating with actually bringing that to life? I would say no, because people get stuck with, where do I find these people? As you would have asked, they're everywhere. You're just not looking hard enough and you're not researching. And so what I would say in terms of just it's probably remove yourself firstly. Remove yourself, see the situation for what it is without the victim stuff like your pains. And yes, that's valid, but you will find that emotion, it will always cloud the way you move. And so if you're strategic and you say, for an example, I want to build this business, break it down. What do you mean 5 years? You want to have a facility? Okay, do you have an architecture in your life? Network with those architecture groups, right? Do you have okay, if it's a facility, what about council? Can you do some research about where you want to go? Go to the place that you want to build this facility. Start drawing the maps. And what I'm trying to say is, do visualizing exercises, but also strategically place yourself in rooms and apply for opportunities without the attachment of being chosen. And I'd say there's a lot of business scholarships, international opportunities, travel opportunities. I kid you not, it's out there. But you need to work on your personal presentation. You need to work on how you show up, the way you dress, the way you speak, the way your social media platforms. I learned this the hard way. I was just talking about my problems like every other day, and just to realize people feel sorry for me, but nobody is actually helping me with the solution because I dived too much into the issues. If you want a solution, you need to create it. And if the solution is to network, go and network.
Oh,
It's easy said than done. As always, the fine.
I want to take you up on something you just said now.
Mm-hmm.
You said your social media, you focused on the problem?
Mm-hmm.
No, no, not the problem. You focused on the pain or something like that
Yes.
instead of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a good way to build a social media platform. But that's not a good way to. Can you help me say that again?
Yeah. So what?
The way you said it.
Yeah,
If you can.
I'm speaking on my own experiences. So if anybody search my name, there's a lot of pains
And that didn't help you.
about my story,
Yeah.
the story that I
Switched it-
put out there.
Yeah. And then you switched it up to what?
Yeah. So I worked on what like my talents. Like I'm really good at business. I kid you not. I'm good at helping people start businesses.
So then became the story you.
That was the story that I
Right.
told primarily. But that's not to say within the business I didn't share pain points to get my point across. But it wasn't the main thing, because what I realized is I was drowning in my problems, and actually physically, emotionally speaking, didn't feel the drive to, like, it was like I was looking for validation, because the question I later asked myself is, why did I share that story? Was it to inspire? Was it to create some sort of empathy or sympathy? And because I was a kid, it was to be heard, to be seen, because like nobody was helping me. So that's where I was. But upon reflection, that's what I discovered. It's very different if your pain is your business. Like you got women who have made family and domestic violence their story. But I would be lying to say that they don't go home and cry it out for having to relive the story they're having to tell over and over in the name of inspiring other women. It's painful. Like, why put yourself through that? You can do it in another medium that doesn't need to be repeated over and over and over. And so, like for me, I just focused on the things I was good at, and if somebody was curious enough, I would happily share if it would help them on their journey.
What? See, in today's world, I do see social media. The internet has kind of democratized learning, wealth creation, and everything in between. And I see social media today as one of the biggest tools in our hands to create, build wealth, and build influence. But in the same vein, many people still do not understand how this works. I said to people, you want to build a business, do you have a social media handle? Oh no, I don't like being on Instagram. I don't like being on Facebook.
That part.
How do you sell?
That part.
And so I personally, of course, I've been part of that in the past. But lately, the last
Yo.
whatever months, I've said to myself, you're gonna hear me
By force.
by force. You
Oh, the-
turn on your phone, you see me there.
Of course.
Instagram. You gotta turn on your Facebook, you see me there.
It has to
You're gonna find me on Twitter, you're gonna find me on LinkedIn.
by force, yeah.
And after a while, you get used to seeing my face. And that became my goal. I don't mind what I'm putting out. Obviously, they're good.
What everybody's saying.
I don't care what you're saying. Whatever.
That's it.
Anyway,
That's
you're going
it.
to see it.
That's it.
And I was saying to someone, I was speaking to this young kid, not a young kid, was like 20 years old. And he was asking me, well, he said he wanted to start creating content. I was like, and I asked him, what are the content you want to create and how would this help your business? It's like, no, I just want to create stuff. And I said to him, it's good to create content, but do not just create. Have a plan.
That's right.
Why are you creating this?
That's
Where are you going to channel this audience?
That's right.
And then I told him my plan.
Mm.
At the time, I just started creating. I haven't started building what I'm building now. On Sunday, he saw me. It's like, I now get what you're trying to say.
It's hard work, man.
Yeah. He said to me,
Yo.
because it was asking, how am I going to monetize this? I said, don't worry. There's the plan I have. All right. I'm going to build up to these points. And I'll start putting out stuff
What will happen?
that will help me monetize this thing. And then he said to me, oh, now I understand what you were saying. No, I bring that to you. From your experience, how impactful is social media today
Yo.
in growing our business?
Okay. as somebody who is very observant, because I watch patterns all the time. It just clicks at me. When I first started BN Collective, it was literally about storytelling. It was called Ignite Creative Media. It was literally all about telling stories and training people to use social media. I ran into a huge wall when I realized nobody's on social media. So I would be training like different organizations. And obviously they would pay. But it just got to a point where I was like, why am I wasting my time like this? Seriously, it's just not really. I'm frustrated because I'm literally saying the same thing over and over. You need to be on social media to be seen. Because I come from a background of like doing a lot of media stuff. TV and, just online. I was very addicted to the phone from a very young age. Used to do TikToks, used to do dancing, very self-expressive online as well as in person. And then essentially like the Meta was introduced. Even beforehand, I think the whole business thing wasn't really like a big deal. But now you had Facebook making money because you could pay for ads. And these things by force were in your face. You could remove it and another ad would come. And then YouTube, like all these platforms started monetizing people who wanted to advertise on these platforms. And the craziest thing now is we've got an algorithm thing. You could be watching, because they're always observing. So you've got to be mindful about the settings and how you allow things, because you could be on Google, for an example. You don't realize, but in the background, in the algorithm, it's picking it up in on your social media. So it's not just your social media. It's the web. It's every application you use, whether it's gaming. It's all the ads are in your face. And so it's so important to take space and take the opportunity to be out there while we still have this like free speech or whatever it is that you're trying to put out there. Be smart, tag on to things that are trending, because that's how you get seen. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people also say this is this generation's thing, but you will find that a lot of old businesses are being left behind because they're not innovating. They're not tagging on to the algorithmic things that are going on. And I mean like video editing, for an example. Short and sharp and sweet, straight to the point. Long form, a lot of people would say is dead. But I'd say like places like Spotify or YouTube is still very relevant for people who are curious enough. But you would know this, like you can do short forms of this interview onto like social media. TikTok is blowing up right now with influencers in an age where anybody can get famous anyhow. Why not your business? Don't be embarrassed, just go for it. And I've had clients who've taken the plunge and just gone for it. And while everybody else is waiting for the right opportunities, they're already making money. And so like I don't care what anybody thinks. Like, okay, I might be swinging a sword here because personally, in my personal life, I do post, but for my business, I unfortunately don't, because I did and I got too many clients, so I had to scale back. So I don't really advertise my business too much. But when it comes to my personal, I'm on Snapchat, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, unapologetically speaking on things that I'm really passionate about. A lot of times it's like I'm treating it as if like, but also the other thing I have warned my clients about is make sure what you're putting online, you're comfortable with it staying on there for the rest of your life. Right. Unfortunately, even if you delete it,
so it's there.
Oh yeah, you can put like what's that function where it's like a little function on the web where you can't track it, or it's like private. Nope. It still can get tracked. It can end up on Google, and that's very hard to remove. So, and that comes from the mistakes I made because I used to post ridiculous dancing videos, which I'm ashamed of now because you should have seen me in my footy shorts just randomly. Actually, there was this one photo I posted. It lives rent free on Google. It was during COVID. Everybody lost their minds, including myself. I took a mower onto the roof.
Oh.
And I was like, this is how crazy COVID has it. My boss saw it, was not pleased. I thought it was private, but it's not private. And so, yeah, social media, I mean, is a very powerful tool, but you have to be smart and strategic. You have to be mindful about what you put out there because people are watching. People that you might not think are watching. I never realized that not only my employers, but people that are wanting to open doors for me, people who admire me, young people who look up to me are watching everything I say, everything I post online. And I remember being on a show called You Can't Ask That. It's on Netflix now, which is so crazy. And it's been shown nationwide in different schools. Like, that's my story. I was like 19, very raggedy, didn't present well, but whatever. But I still have people who call me and they're like, "Oh, we saw you in class," and
Ask that. Okay.
you can't ask that. Yeah, and it's still there forever. Forever. Can you imagine? And that's not just social media, but it ended up on ABC. It's now gonna go on YouTube. I had a call from a PR agent the other time, just letting me know it's going on YouTube. Why? Because I signed a disclaimer.
Yep.
I signed a document that says they can do whatever they want to do. There's nothing I can do about it. So you just have to be mindful. So when I post my content, I actually run it through my mentor before I post it, just to make sure it's aligned with the long-term goals that we have.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't have that person, unfortunately. So that's turned bitter.
Thank you. I'll run quickly through to being collective. I'll go to cars and party. I go to Carla.
It's called In Her Name
In her
Scholarship.
name.
Yep.
I want to go to being collective. Tell me about that. It's a business. I want to believe.
Yes.
What
yes.
inspired the creation? And tell me about the business. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, so being collective is just my name. Collective. Bellamore Ndayikeze collective. Because I built this 10 years ago when I made those promises, and business was one of the things that I started. It's something that I really, really wanted to do, but I just didn't have the knowledge. I was absolutely like nowhere close to understanding what business was all about. As I said, it started off as Ignite Creative Media because I was really passionate about storytelling, particularly telling the stories of like young AFL players that I was coaching at the time. And then it just morphed into BN Collective because I was getting hired to do public speaking, to run workshops, and you got to quote your ABN. And when it comes to tax time, you've got to say what type of business you're doing. And it just was so muddled up. And so I was a sole trader. And essentially, in 2023, I've completely rebranded. And I said, I'm going to be very clear about what I'm doing under BN Collective because people didn't understand what that was all about. Initially, honestly, it was all about people that I knew in my life who were very influential, who had resources, who had connections, that if anybody came to me for any support, I could literally tap in. I could literally go to so-and-so and say, look, can you help this person? Or can you give me advice of how to help this person? And so they became my collective. It was more than 40 individuals that I had on my books. I could literally call and just say, hey, can you provide this service, whether it was a financier or a lawyer or somebody who was a capital venture or somebody in politics, because I had so many clients, so many people. Mind you, it wasn't like a legit business at the time, but I had a lot of young people who would come to me and literally want my advice or want me to support them pro bono. So I was like, okay, they don't have money. I got to do something. And so when I turned it into a business in 2023, like a proper company structure, I literally said, I'm just going to help businesses because that became my ultimate passion, to make young people economic in this country, especially women. And so the business itself was literally entrepreneurs and personal development.
Okay.
Because you can't do business without personally developing your leadership and understanding things like negotiation.
Yep.
These are key skills. And also understanding business is a personal development. When you're doing the business, it's not a business unless you're selling a product or a service. If you don't make your first
So,
sale,
you're a business.
you're not a business. So while you're waiting to build a business, let's work on your leadership skills. Because that will, like confidence, that's a skill. That will give you inspiration to drive this and do it very well. Because the problem is people want to do this, but they're terrible at pitching. They're terrible at communicating. They're terrible at keeping up with stock.
You have a framework for pitching. Sorry to cut you.
Pitching? Yes, I do.
Tell me.
I have a 20-minute pitch. I have a 10-minute pitch. I have a 5-minute pitch.
How do you frame your pitching? So if you're going to pitch to a business.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I would introduce myself. And
Go
then
ahead and do it.
I'll do what? Okay, which business do you want me to pitch? All right, so let me pitch. That's crazy. You're putting me on the spot. I'm trying to think. Taro Roots. So Taro Roots is a serum. Sorry. Let me rewind. On the spot. Hi, my name is Bellamore. Thank you for having me. I will be pitching Taro Roots, which is a botanical hair serum. It has the potential to scale to about $9 million in the next 2 years because it's a product-based business, and I've already sold about $50,000 within 2 months of handcrafting and building it, as my mom has invested over $400, and I would love you as a partner. And I need $20,000, and you can expect a $40,000 return.
How much equity do I get?
$40,000. So you get $20,000 extra
Extra from it. No.
for you investing $20,000.
So if I invested $20,000, I get $20,000 in return. Do I get a stake in the business?
Yes. So you at the moment, there is no stake, but I would say in the next year or so, you can expect $40,000 back.
Thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No.
I did this because
Which one? Which one?
for many young people,
Yeah.
being able to pitch their business
Yeah.
is a problem. I've had
You know what was missing? My passion.
yeah.
Because I was like, wait, I need time.
Your voice tone, you just change and switch.
Oh, yeah. I was like, okay.
But yeah, for a lot of people, pitching or selling their business, it's a problem. I've also had that as well. Would they like it? Would they not like it? Am I the right person to sell this? Am I not the right person? This kind of stuff. It starts just playing out in your head and stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks for
But in that pitch, you would have noticed I said $9 million.
yeah.
That was a hypothetical number.
Is that 50,000 hypothetical as well?
So what typically, yeah, so if I've made 50,000, but it has the potential of $9 million, but I'm asking for you to invest $20,000.
Yeah.
Usually in a pitch, you would say what that will do for your business and the potential, like if you invest more. So you would start with a very low amount, and then maybe pitch. If you were to invest XYZ, this is what you can expect in return. But because it's a personal business for me, usually, like say with Shark Tank, they would ask for a percentage for sure. But there's ways to pitch stake. It depends on where your business is. I have not run the business long enough to have you now have stake in it, unless I truly believe I know you at an individual level, and I know that this will reap benefits on both ends, that you're not just invested for the money, but you invested in me as an individual because it's a personal business.
Yeah.
And my mom's involved, so
Yeah, I
you
get
have to make a choice.
Let's talk about Carla, the In Her Name Foundation.
Yep.
What is that about?
So the In Her Name scholarship, it had a rebrand. It definitely has, you know, Carla is at the center of it. Carla's Zampari. She is somebody who has now passed, a great woman in Australia who is an incredible businesswoman, especially in the fashion world. She's, my goodness, some of those clothes are greatly designed. So this is the first year we're launching the In Her Name scholarship. And essentially, it is a financial investment into 5 incredible young women across Australia. And they get $10,000 in financial investment plus mentoring and support. And once they finish their 12 months, so this could be for anything. There are 5 categories. We've got fashion entrepreneurship. We've got, I think, a skill base, 2 of them. And then we've got like a entrepreneurship one as well. And then we've got another one I have completely forgotten. But there's 5 scholarships up for grabs. And it's $10,000 for the first generation refugee migrants. So this is not second or third. And I know there's some hesitation there, but this is meant for those who are really, who have a huge drive, because we already know there's a lot of ambition and there's a lot of businesses being created in silent corners. And I think this is part of Colours and Party's legacy to create this. So this is done in partnership with the Australian Multicultural Foundation, a very reputable brand that represents multiculturalism in Australia. But In Her Name literally had a rebrand last year because there was this thing of like realizing that actually this is so much more than just financial backing. It's actually like, how can we invest in women who have a lot of potential to economically contribute to this country? And it deeply aligns with me because guess what? I was a recipient in 2023. And that's how I got to rebrand. I actually had financial investment from, it was called Colours and Party at the time, the Colours and Party Scholarship, but now obviously In Her Name. And that basically allowed me to be able to pay for a rebrand. Like, I mean, a refresh, a business plan, marketing plan, you name it. And I also obviously did a launch. So you can do so much with that amount of money, $10,000, and it's yours. But you also get Be Collective, who is able to support you for the 12 months.
What role do you play rather in the whole chain? So I'm talking about the foundation now.
Yep.
Are you a director? Or you, or just as a former recipient, you tend to be one of the ambassadors or stuff like that?
Yes, so I am an alumni member, meaning I have received the scholarship and support, and I continually do. But also my business will be contracted to provide a service to recipients. So they basically get mentored. Whoever the recipients are across Australia will receive mentorship for the full year by myself.
Okay.
And I'll guide them through whatever dream they have, whether it's to do a fashion show, whether it's to run a business, whatever it is, to be honest. And we've got some great supports around that. And I guide them. So my mentoring framework tailors their experiences, and it's co-designed. So for this particular arrangement with In Her Name, it's as a program. The recipients, we co-design how they would like to be supported rather than the typical, this is what I can offer.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it. It's not going to be like that for this particular arrangement.
Beautiful, beautiful. Look, we're just going to be loud enough. It's been quite an interesting conversation. But I got I know. I've got 1 or 2 more last questions
Oh my goodness.
to throw away.
Yo.
And then we'll call it a wrap.
Yeah. Crazy. That's a huge conversation. I have to break it up into 2.
What does success mean to you?
Oh my goodness. I should have seen this coming. That's a very loaded question because success is, like a lot of times, to be honest, I used to see success as fleeting or something I had to fight for. Like, as in, I have to wake up and do X, Y, Z.
Successful.
And I don't believe in that because, first of all, I burnt out from this notion of success. Like, it doesn't matter what I do in this life, small wins is success for me. So when I, for instance, inspired someone, I would, like, I don't think I would consider that success in the past. But right now, if I can change one life for the better, and I mean, someone had a client make her first million, I was like,
That's success.
that is crazy. Me? I did that? So even the first $5,000, mind you, this was a client who had experienced self-doubt for like 5 years, 6 years, coming on 6 years, and just kept on hitting a wall, like just was not going anywhere. And so for me, being able to have this private experience, which, by the way, I don't have to advertise, because God knows what I'm doing behind closed doors in terms of supporting founders and people who are doing business and who are doing it tough on a daily basis where they're not seeing any capital. But to sit down regularly, grill those mentees and actually speak life into them, and then for them to finally make a decision to not just take my advice, but to follow the plan, the business plan which they created with me guiding them, is such a huge honor. Actually, it makes me so emotional to think that I've been able to pull that off, in fact, for an individual. For me, that is success. But I think what backs that notion is, do I have integrity? And that's something that's haunted me, you know. Do I have the integrity enough to do this work and not behind closed doors in my private life, to not live a double life? It's very tempting. It's very tempting, you know, because it's very easy to give people advice, but it's much harder to do it in your own home. And trust me, the struggle is at home. And I battle with it every day, especially being a big sister and a mom who is aging. The weight is so large that I have to make sure that I'm cleaning up my room. I'm making that bed, waking up to clean. My siblings will never know. But when I then go to speak to the mentees, I don't feel guilty for giving them false hope that it's just a walk in the park. No, you're going to have to sacrifice a few things. You're going to have to sacrifice your behaviors. You're going to have to sacrifice these patterns that are literally breaking all these dreams down. And humble yourself. Humble yourself. And so, yeah, like that's the biggest thing when it comes to success, whether there's integrity between the work I'm doing and the life that I live privately that nobody will ever get to know except for those who have such access.
Thank you so much.
Is it too heavy?
No. I'm just hitting it, sucking it in.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me at this conversation.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure having you, to be honest.
Yeah, it's
Wonderful conversations. I honestly didn't cover everything, but
okay.
I tried to do justice to some of the things I put together to ask you. Hope you had as much fun as I did.
Oh, yeah.
You enjoyed the conversation.
It was good. It was good. I wasn't as, you know, but it was,
amazing.
yeah, just,
Much.
no, thank you.